All right, today we're going to learn about Impressionism, and I'm going to start off by just showing you guys this map that dates from 1871 up until the outbreak of World War I in 1914. So these are the countries as we know them. Now we have Germany on here. We have Austria-Hungary over here. Russian Empire has increased. Look at how far they go this way. The Ottoman Empire is receding, and remember, this is where all of the Balkan regions, where all those countries were having trouble with Austria-Hungary trying to take them over. Italy is now one country, and this is really a map that you guys should be very familiar with. Okay, so on historical context, uh, I know I mentioned this in realism, but this is going to have a really big impact in the art styles for the Impressionists. So when Japan opened in 1853, after a very long trade isolation with most countries, it's going to, in 1855, create trade agreements which will allow regular exchange of goods. And at this point, we have several artists that are going to collect Japanese objects, particularly woodcuts and prints. So that's going to have a huge effect on how artists are going to create art. Photography is now going to become more widespread and more acceptable as an art form. It was used often in the United States during the Civil War. It will also be used quite extensively in Europe, and it will also have a lasting impression on this new batch of artists. It totally changed what the artist wanted to depict because with a photograph, your subject is right in front of you, and so it changes the goals of the artist because they wanted to not necessarily depict something that was as straightforward as a photograph. And so the photographic process does influence them, though. Just as a photograph is created by light and it passing through a lens to make an impression on light-sensitive paper, it's also the way our vision works with light and color in regards to how it makes an impression in the back of our minds. So Impressionists really kind of like embrace this idea of the significance of light and lighting. And so the subject matter for many Impressionists isn't as important as it used to be. Like in realism, how they really wanted to depict what the average daily person was like. It's going to be more about how light changes a particular subject. Not for all of them, but for a lot of them. Okay, and then Paris is going to be reconstructed. Like I had mentioned before, Paris had gone through multiple revolutions during, obviously, the revolution in 1789, but also the July Revolution of 1830, revolutions of 1848. There was a lot of civil unrest in the decades that followed as well. And so the government is going to go out of its way to reconstruct Paris, and they're going to create these wide boulevards like the Champs-Élysées and other streets so that they can have access to getting to the places they need to be, like government buildings, without having to worry about barricades. Also, we're starting to see the beginnings of a more modern transportation system, and so they needed to have wider streets to accommodate that. And so I'm going to show you guys a picture of what it looked like and what it looked like after the reconstruction in a minute. New boulevards, though, became lined with fashionable apartment homes, and the city streets became another place for the bourgeoisie, or the upper middle class, to display their lifestyle. Here's the pictures so you guys can see how now they have these main roads that cross. This is the island that's right in the middle of the Seine River that has the Notre Dame at the front. But then they have these boulevards that cross the River Seine from the West Bank and the East Bank up here. And there's the Notre Dame. I might be looking at this backwards because I have no sense of direction. But this, you can see how there's all these wide different streets and nothing that's very large. And these ones are going to be a huge street that can pass now with not just bridges, but with car traffic and so on. So, all right, the next point has to do with Japonisme. That's a French word for the Japanese aesthetic, and they were heavily influenced by Hokusai, also Hiroshige, who did the Bridge in the Rain on the right. If you guys see the Bridge on the right versus Van Gogh's Bridge in the Rain, it's almost like he copied it, although this is paint and this is done by woodblock. And so the Hokusai was the most famous Japanese printmaker. Hiroshige is right behind him, and they did the polychrome woodblock prints. And the most famous scene from the series, titled 36 Views of Mount Fuji, is going to be the Great Wave. But in all of the pieces that Hokusai did with this series, you see Mount Fuji in it. Van Gogh admired Japanese design and both owned and copied them. So did Monet, so did Mary Cassatt. All of the Impressionists were able to own prints from the Japanese series and were very influenced by them. In April of 1890, the École des Beaux-Arts, or the School of Fine Arts in Paris, showcased an exhibition of woodblock prints. And these ukiyo-e pictures or images, remember ukiyo-e means the floating world, were comprised mostly of urban bourgeois pleasure scenes. There were geishas, beautiful women, sometimes sumo wrestlers or actors. And then also, of course, the pictures of the natural beauty around Edo, which is modern day Tokyo. And then the mists of Mount Fuji, also cherry blossoms, rain showers, and then the surging waves along the port of Kanagawa is going to be very popular. And then ever since Commodore Matthew C. Perry helped to open Imperial Japan to the Western trade in 1853, Europe becomes very fascinated with Japanese culture. So artists like Edgar Degas, Camille Pissarro, Claude Monet, Vincent van Gogh, and even James Abbott Whistler were among the many who incorporated elements of Japanese design into their work. Some of them also frequented the antique shops along Rue de Rivoli, which is one of the streets, and then La Porte Chinois, which specialized in Japanese woodblock prints that also had jades, lacquer, and porcelain. The craze of Japonisme went to such heights that in 1853, an English opera team of Gilbert and Sullivan staged their most popular show, a comic opera set entirely in Imperial Japan called The Mikado. Here's a couple. I went to Monet's house in Giverny when I was in Paris. And one of the things that, besides the gardens, you go there to see the gardens, but you also get a tour of his house. And it was left pretty much intact from what when he died. But you can see he had photographs down here framed. But I mean, all of these are different Japanese prints. Look, this was one of the series of Mount Fuji over here. This is a geisha with, looks like a white person. So it was really interesting to be kind of surprised by that. It kind of caught me off guard. And then here's his bed. And there's obviously very famous Impressionist pieces here, some by Renoir and other artists. But he also had, look, photographs right here that are going to be framed. And then over on this side, you could see Japanese prints all over. And then this is, I think this was on one of your tests. I'm pretty sure there was. But this is another of Hokusai's view of Mount Fuji back here. So, okay, so that's it for the historical content. And next will be style and characteristics.